In this video, we will explain how to change a vent solenoid on your Winston 8000 series Collectramatic fryer. You will require the following tools to perform this installation. Before beginning the installation, be sure to unplug the fryer from its power source. Start by removing the back panel assembly. To remove the muffler, lift the assembly off the vent back. Next, remove the 4 screws holding the danger panel in place. Then remove the vent back to reveal the dead weight. Remove the dead weight, then uninstall the vent block by removing the 4 screws securing it to the fryer. Next, remove the left and right side panels by unscrewing the 3 remaining screws on each panel. We can now remove the vent back assembly from the fryer by unscrewing the 4 screws that secure the assembly to the frame. Do not forget to remove the 2 screws located underneath the fryer. Next, unplug the 2 black wires connected to the solenoid. Be sure to clip the small wire tie securing the wires to the vent back assembly before unplugging the wires. Once the wires are disconnected, the assembly can be completely removed from the fryer. The vent solenoid housing must now be removed. Begin by unscrewing the 4 hex bolts holding the housing in place. You must prevent the lock nut located on the opposite side of the assembly from turning while the bolts are unscrewed. Once the hex bolts have been removed, unhinge the vent spring from the assembly. Next, remove the nut and bolt assembly on the inside of the solenoid housing. This will free the solenoid and its housing from the rest of the assembly. Finally, remove the 4 hex bolts securing the vent solenoid to the housing plate. You must prevent the lock nut located on the opposite side of the assembly from turning while the bolts are unscrewed. Begin the installation of the new vent solenoid by securing the assembly to the housing. Using a 5/16 and 3/8 nut driver, install the solenoid so that the lifting arm is facing the oval-shaped hole at the top of the assembly. Reinstall the bolt attaching the solenoid lifting arm to the vent assembly by hand tightening the lock nut. Then, reattach the spring. Next, reinstall the vent solenoid housing to the vent assembly using a 5/16 and 3/8 nut driver. The solenoid wires can now be reconnected. Each wire is attached to one of the coils of the solenoid in any order. We must now reinstall the vent block. Begin by placing the vent block bracket on the vent tube. Next, line up the entire vent assembly and push the vent tube through the hole located in the middle of the vent back assembly. Ensure the O-ring is properly attached, then place the vent block on the vent tube. Ensure the opening in the top of the vent block is pointed upwards, then use the 4 vent block screws to attach the vent block to the assembly. You will need to hold the vent block bracket in place while tightening these screws. Next, reinstall the 4 screws that secure the vent assembly to the fryer. Do not forget to insert the 2 screws on the underside of the fryer. Drop the deadweight into position and ensure the head of the deadweight lines up with the opening in the top of the vent block. Reattach the right side panel, leaving the 2 holes in the top right corner of the fryer open. Repeat this process for the left side panel, leaving the 2 holes on the top left corner of the fryer open. Slip the vent back into place, then, using the 4 remaining screws, reattach the danger sign to the fryer's frame. Finally, reattach the muffler to the fryer. Drop the muffler into place on the 2 poles sticking up from the vent back assembly. Test the assembly by pushing down on the muffler.